Hi, my name is Kati, Texas, and I'm here today with the MARZ Project at the Ink People Center for the Arts. We're doing this series of vlogs to talk about different sort of creative opportunities that are around. I wanted to show off one of the ways of making art that's really near and dear to my heart and near and dear to the ink people, and that is printmaking. Nowadays, if you want to make many copies of something, you scan it into a computer and you just print out a bunch of them. And you can print pictures as large as a billboard or as tiny as you care to. But back in the day, if you wanted a bunch of an image, you had to come up with a way to reproduce that image physically. A very popular way to do that is called block printing. So we're going to talk a little bit about block printing and come up with some results like this beautiful block print by my friend Laura Quinados. And this one is called Holiday Sentiments. I think this is how she was feeling on Valentine's Day. She has Bad Cat Pomegranate Press, so you can check her out. And I'm going to show you how she did this. So block printing basically means that you carve an image in something and you use it like a stamp, like a rubber stamp. We've all seen rubber stamps, but you can carve into lots of different things. You can carve into a block of wood and create some what would then be called a woodcut. But carving into wood can be really difficult. It takes a lot of hand strength. So there's more modern materials that people use. The most popular one, I think, is this sort of rubbery stuff. You can buy this and you essentially make your own rubber stamp. You can carve into this. It's nice and soft. It's flexible. It holds a line really well, so you can get detail like this. You can also carve in a sheet of linoleum. They sell special kinds of linoleum. And linoleum, it's just like you'd find on your floor. It has a cloth backing. It's pretty flexible, and then the front is a kind of rubbery substance that's made out of linseed oil, and you can carve into this too. It's a little different. It's a little more old school. This synthetic rubber is a really popular modern material to work with. This is my cat. This picture is called Tabaco. And then this rubber, let's see, I have an example here. This is this print right here. So I was doing a printmaking demonstration, and I wanted to do something old school, so I came up with, I've always really loved nasturtiums. So I drew this picture directly onto this block, which involved drawing a bunch of letters backwards, and then carved it out, and then you put the ink on it, and then you can print it up on different kinds of paper, and you get this sort of result here. Here's another example. This is our Ink People logo. And this is done in gold ink on black paper, so you can get some nice contrast there. I've also used this and put different kinds of glue onto my stamp, and then stamped it on and done like embossing powders or glitter, because I like shiny things. So there's a couple of different examples of this sort of thing that you can do with block printing in this synthetic rubber material. I'm going to go ahead and show you that process from start to finish. First thing you need is some material. Well, I have this little bit left over from some other projects, so I'm going to make basically a stamp or a block for printing that is this big. And I thought I could make just a piece that says MARZ, because we're here for the MARZ Project. MARZ, if you didn't know it, stands for Media and Arts Resource Zone. So in this zone, you can find resources for making media and arts, such as this. I know my stamp's going to be about this big, so I'm going to go ahead and just trace this onto a piece of paper so I know how big the thing is, how big space I have to work with. And then inside here, I'm going to draw what I want. Okay, so that's pretty much what I want, because I got to do this fast, so I'm keeping it simple. Now, you might notice that stamps like this one are backwards, because I have to put the ink on here, then I'm going to put the paper down, and then when I pick it up, it's going to be backwards from the stamp. You see there's a reflection. So what I have to do is a little bit of brain work here, and I'm going to trace this onto the back of the paper. I happen to have a little sheet of acrylic here that I can use and just kind of hold this in such a way that the light is shining under it. If you don't have a sheet of acrylic or glass, you can tape your work to a window. That's always a good way. Or if you have a fancy schmancy light table, you can use that. Tracing paper is also good. So now, how do I get that onto the stamp? Well, I'm gonna pull a cheaty move here. I'm going to take my piece of paper, I'm going to go back over to this side, and then I'm going to color it with graphite. This is just a really big version of the stuff that's inside of a pencil. It's just graphite. It's not lead. No such thing as a lead pencil. And I'm going to take this and I'm just going to fill this space up with graphite. It's going to cover all my letters like this. Now I can take my stamp blank and lay this on there. Get it positioned right so I can see the light through it, so I can tell it's lined up right. I'm going to kind of fold down the edges, and what's happening is while I'm pushing down on the paper, the graphite on the back of the paper is being pushed into the block. And I should, if I do this right, come up with my design basically drawn onto my block so I know where to carve. Ta-da! Now I have my design in graphite on my block, and now I just need to carve it. I'm going to take my gouge, which is a carving tool. It's a speedball gouge. They make lots of great kinds of carving tools, linoleum cutters, and they have all these different little tips which fit into the handle. The tips are all different shapes and sizes. They usually have numbers on them. And these different shapes and sizes create different shapes and sizes of holes, of lines. So if I carve with a really big wide gouge, I'm going to get a big wide cut. If I carve with a little tiny gouge, I'm going to get finer lines. So I'm going to start with this little bitty gouge, and I'm going to make an outline around my letters. Now here's a really important bit. When you're carving in a block, you're cutting away whatever you don't want to have ink on it. So what I'm going to leave is going to be the stamp. So I just give this a little bit of a shade in, so I remind myself that this is where the actual stamp is going to be, and that everything else is what I'm going to cut off. Shade all that in. So you can see everything that's inside the letters is going to stay, everything that's outside the letters is going to go. Okay, here, so I have gotten most of the material off. I think my details are looking pretty good. It's not super tidy, but this is a quick and dirty project. You might notice that there are these interesting lines and patterns now in the background, and you're not really going to see them because they are below the level of the letters, so they're not going to come through on the paper. But sometimes people will deliberately leave those in a print, kind of like the lines here in my nasturtium print, or these in Laura's print. And I think it's a style thing, but sometimes when you carve out these lines, you don't quite get them far enough down, and they do show up in the print. So sometimes people will deliberately put them in there as shading or as context, just to kind of, it gives it a woodcut look. It looks like a block print if you do it that way. I'm going to go ahead and do mine nice and clean. And I'm going to start with a test print. I'm pretty sure I got all the material out of the way. Okay, now I'm pretty sure. And I'm going to go ahead and test print this. Clear a little room here. Now I can take this and I can just dab it onto a stamp pad. This is what I did with this one. I just dabbed this onto the stamp pad, kind of just squish it on there, put it on the paper, works great like a stamp. But you're always going to get uneven coverage. So when you're doing block prints, what most people will do is take a piece of glass or acrylic and a special tool called a brayer. It's just a little rubber roller. And mine has these feet on it so that when you sit it down, you're not sitting it on the roller itself, so your roller always stays round. If you were to take this and lay it in a drawer and it sat on one side all the time, it eventually would develop a flat spot, and that would make it slightly yet less useful. I have my sheet here, and I'm going to take some ink. Block printing ink comes in all kinds of great colors. Here's a really cool fluorescent pink. Here's like a opaly pearly pink. You can see where my tastes lie. This is black, super traditional. White, also very good. We're going to go with black ink on white paper because it shows up nice and contrasty. This is a water-soluble ink. It's very easy to clean up. They also come in oil-based and other kinds, heat-set ink so that you can print onto fabric and then iron it and it'll be permanent ink. I like the water-soluble ink for demonstrations because it's just easier to clean up, and I don't walk around with black smudgy fingers all day. This is just a piece of cardstock. When you're printing on paper, just like the ink is only going to stick to the top of the stamp, the ink is really only going to stick to the top of the paper. So this paper is super smooth. If you have paper that has a lot of texture on it, it's going to affect the way the print looks. I'm going to take my brayer. I've got my ink here, and I'm just going to roll it out until it gets leggy. And it's super flat. And you can kind of feel, you hear this. Kind of just has just the right texture when you feel like it's got a good solid layer on there. And I have ink on the brayer now, and I'm just going to put that onto my stamp. And if I roll that nice and level, that nice flat brayer is just going to roll ink right across whatever is sticking up and not off anything down below. And you can see now that design really comes through. I can see there's a couple little mistakes here, a couple little places where I didn't quite get it all carved off. We're not going to worry about that. And then we just plop and pray. This is always the challenging bit. Get the paper where you want it, get some good pressure on there without smearing it around. So I'm just going to do one up kind of in the corner. Well, I'll just do the middle. Just going to drop that right there. Good pressure. Try not to let it slide around. What do you think? Is it going to work? Ta-da! All right, there is my quick and dirty block printing lesson. You can carve it, you can ink it, you can stamp it. You can do this yourself, and you can do this at the MARZ Project if you want to come down and talk to us. We also do lots of really great digital art, whether it's music or video or digital graphics. Come on down to the MARZ Project at the Ink People. Anyone ages 12 to 26 this summer can join us and make your art stuff happen.